It's literature day. I'm in my office, my study, and I'm looking at all my favorite books. I got way too many books, but I've dug a bunch of them out to run them by you. I want to show you some of my favorite books of all time. Where should we start here? This is a good one. This is by Jeff Cooper. It's called To Ride, Shoot State, and Speak the Truth. It's full of lots of rifle stuff, kind of. And this is Ken Easton's book, $1 Million Blackjack. This is about the first guys that really took a serious run at team card counting. I think it was in the 70s. It's really interesting. A great story. It's really good. Much better than the one that you've seen with Kevin Spacey. This guy, interestingly, was also, I think he was like a developer of the early video games. I think he was involved with Pac-Man or something. He's got a really 70s look to him. You can see that. Anyway. This could be pretty much any Louis L'Amour. My favorite actually is called Tucker by Louis, but I don't know where that one is. This is a good one too. There's a million of them. You know how that goes. Dusters. Mordecai Rissler. O Canada, O Quebec. It's kind of eye-opening. Depends what side of the argument you're on, I guess. And if you're an American, it might not interest you, but then it might. Quebec is struggling under the iron grip of Canada. This is a good one. One of the best autobiographies I've read. This was quite formative for me at one point in my life. This is fantastic. It's really thin. It's a short read, but it's by Smedley Butler. You should look him up on the internet or whatever. He's a fascinating figure. He was a hero of the Marine Corps in the early part of the century, and he was approached in the 20s or the 30s by like a bunch of super elite rich people, and they wanted him to stage a coup and bring down Roosevelt, and he was a patriot and routed them out. But he's really fascinating because he's like a hero. He's still a hero to the Marine Corps, as far as I know. The guys that I talk to, they still talk about him in their Marine history courses. But in the end of his career, he takes a long look at what he's done over his lifetime and decides that, well, war is a racket. He talks about how he's been a thug for corporate interests, which is really interesting because this is a long time ago. This is like 20s, teens, and it's not some hippie saying it either. It's interesting because he's a decorated, renowned Marine hero. Anyway, fascinating. This is a great Follett book. I've read other stuff. If you like spy stuff by Ken Follett, but this is a unique book, The Pillars of the Earth, and I read it way before it was on Oprah's book list, so the hell with her. Gabriel, Garcia, Marquez. There's two or three his I like. This is the Autumn of the Patriarch. No, it's not. It's 100 Years of Solitude. It's the Spanish version, that's why I can read it. But I just bought this in Cuba for the hell of it. But the English versions are also good. I don't speak Spanish or read it, but he hardly uses any punctuation in this. Every chapter has about 4 periods and 3 commas. But he writes a lot about South American dictators, that kind of thing. It's interesting. This was a gift from Ramla Jack Elliott. It's called Trail Dust and Saddle Leather by Jose Mora. I think it's Jose. He's from Venezuela, I think, originally, but he cowboyed in the early days. And it's a really fascinating history of cowboy culture and cowboy gear. It kind of gives you the primer on where all the cowboy stuff came from, both the Texas tradition and the Western California tradition, whatever they're called. There's 2 kind of main branches, as I understand it. This is kind of cool. It's signed by Jack. This is a well-worn copy of Hunter Thompson's book, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail. everybody knows him from the Vegas book, and it's fun. It's a good romp, but his political writing is outstanding. It's really good. I read this book. I don't know how many times I read this book. Every time there's a U.S. election cycle, I read it. It's a really good way to refresh your memory and reintroduce you to American political electoral processes. And he does an extremely good job of caricaturing politicians. He's really good at it. Hell's Angels is good too, but this is my favorite. This is my 4th copy or something. This is one I take on the road with me. My dad had me reading this when I was a kid. It's a really good book about the history of Israel and the Jewish people, and from the time of like way pre-monotheistic times, like it goes almost from I'm not sure if it's prehistoric, I can't remember, but way back before Jewish people had their Jewish religion, way back before that. And he always has that. I don't know if you've read Michener before, but he has this sort of gimmick he uses where he takes a geographical area, and he sort of, each chapter is like a different era in the same area, and he tells the history of a place. Like he's done Hawaii, he's done Poland, he's done a bunch of them. But the source is about the Holy Land, and it's really, really interesting. I'm not really religious, but I'm pretty fascinated by the history of it. And lastly, this is one of my favorite books of all time. It comes out, there's been about 4 or 5 editions, but it's a travel guide for, well, dangerous places. And Pelton's quite an interesting figure. He sort of he actually goes to these horrible places, you know, Chechnya and you know, East Timor and Algeria and all these deadly places, and he basically writes tongue-in-cheek sort of gallows humor travel guide pieces about it. It's really good. And this has had a big effect on me. He was talking about Osama bin Laden way before he did the building thing. He was way ahead of us on that. But yeah, I don't know. This is kind of rambling, but I don't know. That's what I'm reading. Actually, it's not what I'm reading right now. Those are some of my all-time favorites. I have this thing where I'm starting to get jaded and old, and I'd rather read an old book that I know that I like than take a chance on a new one sometimes. Same with movies, which is probably not a good thing. But sometimes depth is as good as breadth, maybe better. The only book that I wasn't able to find that I wanted to show you was, I think it's called Gambling Scams and How to Avoid Them, and it's well worth the $20. Alright, hope you found that interesting.
Playing late night crazy pot-sized games at the